Hey guys, welcome back to Planet Coaster. Today's episode marks the start of a little 3-episode run in which I'll attempt to finish the Mainstreet. Reason being is that I don't think I can continue much longer on this park, and I've sort of been giving signs about this a little bit as well, but I just want to quickly explain it here. Basically, I just want to start wrapping it up and release a video of it sometime soon, and also release it in the park file. Because I don't think I can work on the park much longer given the fact that Alpha 2 is coming pretty soon, and I do want to start a new park in Alpha 2, not to mention that this park is going to feel somewhat outdated with the new stuff that comes out in Alpha 2, and instead of dwelling on the past, I just want to really experiment with some of the new things in the new Alpha and just leave this as the sort of Alpha 1 park. My plan has always been to just make one park per alpha state of the game, so you can also kind of see the progression happening there. So I will release this park in both a video and the park file before the new alpha comes out, but there's not a lot of time left and I'm sort of going to be quite busy this period of time, so I'll try to get this done as quickly as I can, and I'm in the sort of wrapping up of the park stage at this point, and the most important things were that I just really wanted to finish those parts of the park which would make like the immersiveness, like would really break the immersion if they weren't finished. So the Mainstreet, for instance, was a really important part. There are also still some like small unfinished parts in the Japanese area. I also may address some parts of the Roman area, but it's mostly things like that which I'll go over until I release the park. The park will be released partly unfinished in the sense that I won't start a new area and the rest of the park will just be filled with some trees and some places will just be kept open, and I might probably just put some coming soon billboards here and there just so maybe people can pick up the park and have their own ideas on how they want to finish the rest of it. That would be pretty interesting, really. But yeah, I basically won't really finish the entire park, at least not in the sense that I was hoping to. Another reason is actually that I have been getting into performance issues lately, as I've also talked about before, and even though I'm really glad I got it to work again, because this is the first episode I recorded again after numerous times of trying to get the game to work, and it lagged so much I couldn't even work in it with enormous amounts of UI and mouse lag. But it's alright, again, so I just wanted to record some episodes of me getting stuff done that's most important to get done, but I really don't think I can push the park much further, so I kind of want to finish it to a presentable stage while it's still safe to do so. It also means these episodes will get maybe a little less experimental, because the park at this point is really just a not so coherent like collection of different little experiments and tryouts with different things that I wanted to make, and it's sort of time to try and connect those different parts of the park which at the moment don't really seem so connected, and kind of fill in the gaps that were still left there. And the first thing I wanted to do is give the Mainstreet something more interesting than just a simple building, so I wanted to have a quick simple restaurant, kind of like Casey's Corner, except this one is really on a sort of central plaza in the Mainstreet, which most of the Mainstreet is also really built around, I would say. The Mainstreet is going to be quite small, and this plaza is going to be really the only thing that the Mainstreet really has going for it, and I just wanted to have a small restaurant over here. Emphasis on small though. I wanted to get a really urban, dense feeling and atmosphere to the Mainstreet in general, so there will be the more high, tall townhouse kind of buildings, and they will be quite closely packed together. So I didn't want to make this restaurant too large and kind of make the plaza seem like a really vast field of just paths and restaurants. Hence why it's more built as a sort of really small alcove kind of building, with just a couple of tables in front of it to create a general atmosphere, but while still regaining that sort of really urban feel of the Mainstreet in the future, which probably doesn't make any sense at this point in time, but hopefully it'll make sense at some point in the future. At least that was the idea when I was building this. There wasn't really any main inspiration for this building, but I just wanted to create a domed restaurant actually, which is pretty interesting. And try a really standard entrance with a pediment and just some pillars in front of it to make it look a bit fancier than just a simple entrance. And I think the most recognizable thing about this building is definitely the windows, interestingly. I just wanted to try and get like some of these really large arched windows in, and I really felt it would be quite feasible actually to make these things by just layering multiple windows on top of each other and having this large wall arch around it with just a couple extra details, and that's how they came out, and they are generally the most unique thing about this building and something which I do like and actually worked really well. So unless something new is coming in the future, this is definitely something that I do want to try a bit more in the future as well. But yeah, aside from that, it is a pretty simple building. That said, there will be a dome in the middle of the building, but I'll get to that in the future of the episode. First, I wanted to get into the townhouses and the surroundings of the building a little bit more to get a general sense and idea of how the dome should look to make the restaurant kind of work in the rest of the environment. And the rest of the building is really pretty simple. There was a lot of like experimenting with the smaller pieces to see different ways to make pillars and cornices and things like that, but it's nothing really unique at this point in time. It's just that with every single building, and this is something that I try to do in the entire Mainstreet, and it's definitely something that will come back a lot when I work on the townhouses. Buildings are going to be somewhat similar to regain or to obtain some sort of general sense of style within the street and keep it more as an ensemble and make everything fit together a little bit. But there will be like smaller differences between the buildings when it comes to cornices or balconies or the way the windows are made or the specific ways that the pillars are made, just to get these very subtle differences to make these seemingly very similar buildings still have some sense of uniqueness to them, while still making it seem like they all belong together at the same time. So yeah, that'll be most of the like experimenting with things. It'll be mostly about getting new and different types of cornices, dormers. Dormers is actually something that I'll get to quite a lot. And pillars as well is something that turned out you can actually make a pretty good variety of pillars with the things that we have in the game. Though I should probably say pilasters because they're attached to walls. But yeah, that is just about it for this somewhat simple restaurant building. It's a building that I feel is really simple in the way that it's generally built, but it actually still took a lot of time to build, and like 1.5 hours for the like amount of detail that there is and the way that all of the details are made. So moving on to the second building, this building pretty much became more or less the blueprint for the rest of the townhouses in the area, and it's also the reason why I wanted to make this building before I actually finished the restaurant and put the dome on top of that, just to get a general sense of scale of how the Mainstreet in general is gonna work and how it's gonna look in the end. And yeah, this was basically my first try at it, though I have to say I didn't really have any specific plan. I just kind of got Google Images, I googled French townhouse and just kind of went with what the results gave me in general. So that was just about my very professional approach there. Yeah, that's pretty much it. What's interesting about these though is that I really wanted to move away, as you can see with the placement of the door here, from the full tile placement of all the windows and doors, because the townhouses have like quite closely packed windows, and they're much more like vertical in appearance because they're pretty tall and they have a lot of vertical elements like pillars and things like that, and it just works a little bit better, I feel, with more dense amount of windows. And also many of the townhouses have like 3 or 5 windows, and just having 2 windows, one on each tile, just felt like it wouldn't be dense enough and like it wouldn't really work well for the concept. So all of the buildings are going to be right about 2 tiles wide and going to have 3 windows. And that's the general blueprint. And then I just wanted to have unique cornices and unique pillars and all that good stuff for all the different buildings. So yeah, I used this same method for many of the other buildings as well. Just make a separate building where you can just kind of mess with the pillars and get all of the little details of the pillars right, and then just copy them over into the building. It definitely isn't perfect, and like some of the windows and pillars are definitely offset. Like some pillars stick out a little bit more from the building than others, or the distance between the windows isn't entirely correct and the building ends up not being entirely symmetrical as a result. But it's just something that I find is really hard to do anything against, and as long as it seemed like it was just about right, I figured it would be good enough to go with. So yeah, for the windows as well over here, I wanted to make like really some of these really tall townhouse windows. Though also interestingly, I wanted the second, yeah, that is the second floor. The second floor windows to be smaller than the first floor windows, not just because they quite often are in real life, but also because this is actually a feat that many main streets, and very famously the Disney main streets, do as well. Like the floors on Disney main streets are actually gradually getting smaller the higher up they are. So the base floor has a pretty high ceiling, but then every floor after that is getting lower and lower, which kind of make the buildings seem a little larger than they actually are. And hence also why I kind of want to make every single floor on these townhouses a little smaller than the floor underneath it as well. Though the exception with this one being this first building, where the first floor actually has really tall windows. But yeah, that's the general idea behind it. There was also a lot of playing with different types of roofs. The roofs are pretty steep for these kinds of townhouses, and they are also quite important to the general look of the building. I find that with townhouses like this, or with buildings that have spires or really high towers, like what's on top of the building is really important for how the building in general looks and kind of the general appearance of the building. So I really wanted to make sure that all of these dormers on the buildings were actually something that I was happy with, and they felt like some of the most important elements of these buildings really. Hence also why I wanted to have these dormers on top of the buildings, which are composed of different windows and different small pieces to get just about the exact thing that I wanted for every single building. And yeah, the rest of the building pretty much has a very similar approach. Or the rest of the buildings, I should say. Now by adding these townhouses, you can also kind of see how much of an effect it has on the way that the restaurant looks, because right now I feel the restaurant is kind of dwarfed by these townhouses around it. I also did want to have the townhouses get a little bit larger, as in a little bit taller, as they come closer to the plaza. Like the plaza is sort of the main area of the entire Main Street and kind of what you're drawn into. So I wanted to have really the largest townhouses right around here. And at this point they do kind of dwarf the restaurant, which is kind of the little more study that I wanted to get going here, because I was really afraid that the restaurant would end up looking a little bit too small. Like the idea also behind placing the restaurant a little bit behind these townhouses is, while keeping that sort of urban feeling while still having a restaurant, was also to kind of make the restaurant seem a little larger than it or a little further away and larger than it really is, because it's not even a very large building and it's not very far behind these townhouses either. But I was really hoping to get sort of general effects where, because the restaurant is placed like a little further away from the center of the plaza and a little lower at the same time as well, it would feel like it's a little further away and make it seem a little larger at the same time. And it's something which I figured would work quite well, but doesn't really work well at this point in time. So I figured I would need quite a large dome on top of the restaurant to kind of work against the like the pretty large townhouses and their height that they have at the moment. So yeah, that's what I wanted to do with that. Now this is actually, interestingly, the only building where I had two dormers, but the dormers don't actually follow the rest of the layout of the building. Usually, like, every single thing on the building follows the same general layout. So, for instance, the little blocks on the balustrades on top of the building are exactly in the same line as the pillars of the building, which are at the same time exactly in the same sort of vertical line as the base of the walls of the building. And the same goes for the windows. Usually I have the windows in the exact same vertical line as the dormers on top of the roof, but this building was actually one sort of exception where I wanted to have two dormers just to see how it would kind of work, even though there are 3 windows on every single floor. I do kind of like the effect, but in general I'm just slightly more of a fan of the more clean looking, having everything in the same vertical line sort of approach to things. Now with that out of the way, I just wanted to come back to the restaurants again, with the townhouses having a little bit of a better idea of what the area around the restaurants is going to look like. and add the tables and a bit of scenery around the restaurant to make it look a little bit more inviting. I have gotten quite some comments about the fact that the general park, but especially the main street, doesn't look very theme park-ish. There's the dome, by the way, which is just very easily copied over from another dome, which I'll get to later. But I did get some comments about the fact that the park isn't looking so theme park-ish because there aren't really any signs, or not too many signs, no real theme park elements, which is still something that I'll add in the main street as well. Some of it will be added off screen, but it'll also come back in some future episodes as well. But as you can see here, I'm also getting into some more signs, like for instance the like the ice sort of yeah, what is that actually? I have no idea. But like that neon thing there over there to kind of create a bit more of an atmosphere. And I'll get into other type of restaurant signs and things like that in the future as well. And when it comes to the dome, it is just a copy of the other dome out of pure laziness and because it saves time and is a lot easier. And it just felt like the perfect dome in the way it looked and also the size. I just kind of placed it and quickly took a look to see how well it would actually work and if it kind of offsets the height of the townhouses around it pretty well. And it actually works perfectly. Though just to make it a little bit different and not the exact same dome, I did remove some of the details, added a couple other things, and I did want to change the top a little. I wasn't too happy about the top of the other dome there, so I wanted to try this more sort of cupola type thing on top of the dome, to have that little dome on top of a dome kind of idea. And I'm actually really happy with how that turned out. And in general, it is a bit more of a fancy, clean looking dome than the other one. So yeah, that was the general idea behind that building. This is just about what I'll actually get into this episode. The rest of this episode will actually be lighting, which is something that I haven't really shown off too much yet in the rest of this series. And also something which I didn't get to quite a lot in the main street so far. So just something that I really wanted to get to still. Though it's not as interesting in terms of any decisions that I had to make. I just wanted to make sure that everything was sort of more or less well lit. There are still some like slight adjustments that I'll make in the future because it is quite hard to get this right sometimes. Many of the lights, like the lanterns, are like have a really small radius. They don't really spread out as much, so they can be used to create a general atmosphere, but you can't really use them to light anything up. And I find the only really good things to light things up are the spotlights, but at some points there wasn't really any place nearby where I could place a spotlight without placing it in the middle of a path. So sometimes I was more or less forced to use these little attached to wall kind of lights, but the sort of drawback I find to the wall attached lights is that they are really bright and they really light up one particular small part of the building a lot while leaving the rest still somewhat dark. One general kind of thing I wanted to keep in mind here though with the lighting is that I wanted to have a more atmospheric sort of feeling to all of the buildings on the first floor. So as you probably saw, all of the lights on the base floor are just yellow lights and the sort of the lantern very orangey lights. And from that point onward, like the first and the second floor and the third floor all have these really white spotlights on them. So there is that contrast between having the yellow base floor lit lights and the rest of the buildings where the higher floors are all in this very white light. So yeah, that was the general idea there. And for the rest, I just wanted to find a way to get this building to actually light up, because obviously this is the biggest weenie in the park. This is actually the tallest building in the entire park, and I just wanted to make sure that this building was quite lit, but I also didn't want it to be entirely white. Like, white really felt like a color I didn't really want to have here. I wanted to have the tower be a little bit more atmospheric than just that, and white is just kind of harsh and not as natural. So I wanted to get this sort of orangey yellow lights, which lights up the tower but at the same time is still atmospheric and not too bright. So it was just kind of hard to get the exact right spots, because I just had to find certain areas and certain buildings next to this building, or certain places where I could attach spotlights that would actually work. Which is a bit of a hassle at the moment. In the future, at least, the rotation of objects is going to help out a lot and make things like this a lot easier. But at the moment you can't really freely rotate what the spotlights are going to be rotated towards, so it can be a bit of a puzzle. every now and then to get these spotlights to be exactly where you want them to be. Also, I have to say, I am like no lighting master. I know that's a thing, but yeah, I am not that kind of person, so I just was kind of looking for a way to get my buildings to light up in a nice way over here, but in no way am I like a real expert on this type of thing. Unless you count my RCT3 experience, but that was a completely different thing. Not even that much, anyway. And actually, yeah, over here I had the same sort of approach, like but the base floor is yellow over there as well, with the top floors being more white. But anyway, yeah, that's it for this episode. I am just about running out of time-lapse. So, thank you guys for watching this episode. In the next episode, I'll do some more work on the Mainstreet, mainly working on some new townhouses, and in the episode after that, which is just very newly recorded, I'll finish the Mainstreet and maybe get to something else. So hope to see you then.